AM 1460, the new WXBR. You are listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. Peter Zimbor and Mike Pava here with you on this Monday morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Top of the morning to you.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, Mike.
Happy St. Patty's Day, Pete.
You know, this is one of those rare circumstances where it is a day where we know ultimately all of our listeners are going to be drunk at some point, but right now it's early in the morning and they are all sober.
I don't know if that's true.
Mike is disputing that. There's some guy outside of our studio right now, and I'm disputing that guy. He's wearing a green top hat. He's having fun. Well, Mike, with it being St. Patrick's Day, and with us throughout the first year of our show's existence, our 1 year anniversary of the show existing is tomorrow, one thing that we've wanted to do is bridge the past with the present as we look towards the future by bringing back a lot of our favorite former AM 1460 hosts on both WXBR and the WBET call letters. In studio before, we've had Charlie Bergeron, Steve Mason a few times. We've had our good friend Betsy Zulis, who actually will join us in studio tomorrow for our 1 year anniversary show. Matt Futrell, former Brockton Rock's play-by-play announcers, joined us in studio. The list goes on, and one person who we have not had on yet, who oddly enough, on our first show, we said, too bad that our show started on March 18th, because if it was March 17th, we knew who our guest would have been on March the 17th. That is none other than a man who over 3 decades hosted Sounds of the Emerald Isle, an Irish music and comedy program that aired on Sundays on AM 1460. Mr. Jim Larkin. Mr. Jim Larkin joins us in studio right now. Jim, good morning and welcome to the program here on the new WXBR AM 1460.
Hey, Jim.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, Mike. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you guys.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you. You were actually in studio once on our show, but your voice really wasn't heard so much. You were performing with the Council Chords, who will be performing during the 7 o'clock hour this morning. So we still have the Council Chords singing some Irish folk songs to come here on WXBR. But it must be a trip to be back on the AM 1460 frequency, if only for an hour this morning.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, I spent over 30 years here. So, you know, it's a long time. I never thought I'd make it 2 years, to be honest with you. But
how did Sounds of the Emerald Isle, the Irish music and comedy show in the old WBET and then WXBR, start? Because it was a staple on the AM 1460 frequency for over 3 decades. As we've mentioned, there's people who would tune in each and every Sunday to your program. How did it start? How did you get involved in radio?
Well, I actually got involved in radio back in the early 70s. It had to do with a fellow that used to book my band. And he approached me with this idea. He said, "Do you have any Irish records?" I said, "I got plenty of them." He said, "Well, I have an idea." He says, "Would you be interested in doing some special radio?" I said, "Yeah, what do you have in mind?" He said, "Well, we're going to get you to come into a recording studio with some records. I'm going to have you do a show, and I'm going to go out and sell that show for St. Patrick's Day to radio stations all over the place."
The same idea we had.
So we did that for about 4 years, and that was the end of that. And I wanted to get back into radio again, and I was actually working on getting back into radio. I was talking to some people up on the North Shore about doing what would have been an oldies show up there. But the more I was around this area, I lived in Brockton. I moved to Brockton, and I was singing in all the clubs. I used to have clubs here playing Irish music all the time. And the more I would go into these clubs, everybody would keep saying, "Geez, I wish Brockton had an Irish radio show." And I heard this everywhere where I was going. Boy, Brockton should have an Irish radio show. They had 3 Irish clubs in the area. So I thought to myself, that might be an idea. So I asked a few people, what's the best station in Brockton to approach to do an Irish radio show? And it's got to be WBET. They're the #1 station. There were 3 at the time, CAV, BET, and AMK. So I called up the manager of WBET, and come in to see him, and the program director, told him what I had in mind, and when do you want to start? I started the following Sunday.
See,
that's how it started.
In my mind, I think of you as being a radio guy through and through. Mike and myself know radio people when we see radio people, but you weren't always a radio guy. You actually have a background as an Irish folk musician.
Well, kind of. I mean, that was more a hobby. Yeah, I did it as a living for a while, but basically I was an insurance agent for until I retired recently for medical reasons, and that's been my mainstay is the insurance business. But on the side, yeah, I always had a band. We did Irish, we did folk music back in the 60s, and I used to play with Eamon McGurr down the Cape, a famous Irish singer who owned a place in Dennisport. We used to do Friday and Saturday nights down there every summer, and And then he moved up to Albany, New York, opened a club there. I put my instruments away and lost interest for 21 years or so.
Well, why did you lose interest in performing for 21 years?
I hadn't been performing. After Amons, I just stopped performing, put the instruments away, and never bothered with them, and just kind of lost interest. I didn't lose interest in the radio, obviously.
Yeah, you stuck with that for over 3 decades.
Yeah, and I never lost interest in going out taping groups to play on the radio, but just going around performing, it was a little too much, and I had a bad back anyway, and lugging equipment was not something that I could do anymore, so I think that's why it happened that way.
The banjo can get quite heavy, Mike.
You look great in a banjo, by the way, Pete.
I look like a banjo guy.
You're a banjo kind of guy.
I think I got.
Well, you're
going to
be today after seeing you pluck a few notes on my banjo.
I think I could become a banjo guy.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be doing that every morning once I get myself a banjo. There's got to be someone selling a banjo on Craigslist or something.
They're all over the place. eBay.
All right.
Yeah, eBay. Get some good deals.
Folks out there, if you're selling a banjo, give us a call. Let me know. Let's strike a deal. You're listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. We're chatting with longtime host of Sounds of the Emerald Isle, a longtime Irish music show which aired here on AM 1460 for over 30 years. His name is Jim Larkin, joining us in studio. When I was a kid, about 4 or 5 years old, my next-door neighbor was a guy named Alfie O'Shea.
Oh, yeah, right.
And Alfie O'Shea was an Irish singer-songwriter who would perform at local clubs and whatnot. And as a toddler, I saw Alfie O'Shea's album, and I just thought he must have been rich and famous.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy's got an actual record, and he lives right next door to me. That's incredible.
Well, it's funny because I had a visit at the radio station one night. This guy was ringing the bell to come in one night, and he says, we had the buzzer system, and I says, who's that? And, I'm here to see Sonny May. And he was from Ireland, and he was coming to see the country guy. So he comes up to see Sonny May because he did country music in Ireland. And we got chatting on my show, and I ended up singing with Pete Duffy. He was playing with Alfie O'Shea, but he was gradually breaking away from that band to do more on his own, and I was teaming up with him as much as possible. And then he went back to Ireland, and in 86 or 87, never saw him again. And I did play with Alfie's band a couple of times back around that time, too, filling in for him.
Alfie O'Shea, years later, his brother, oddly enough, lived around the corner from my new house as a teenager, and he used to throw parties. And one night, Alfie O'Shea came to his party at like 1:30 in the morning with banjo acoustic guitar and played a set out in the backyard by a campfire, and it was totally cool.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Great.
Jim, what was some of your favorite memories of hosting Sounds of the Emerald Isle in the 30-plus years in which you did it?
There's so many. It was always great to have a new guest on, especially one calling in from Ireland, especially in the early days, because that was very tough to do, and it cost a lot of money back then. First person I ever had call me on the radio from Ireland was in 1983, or 82, March of 82, and it was Irish comedian Hal Roach. He called me, came right off stage, and he called me from Jury's Hotel. And that was a very, very exciting time for me, having Hal Roach on, because I had just started playing Irish comedy in 82, along with the music. And then he put Tony Kenny on the phone, and I chatted with him. And before you know it, all these people in Ireland were coming on the show, and that was very exciting. People that I've been playing that I never met, never got to see, because I hadn't gone over there. And it was good to be able to have them on.
Now, you got into radio in sort of a niche role, being the guy that would do the Irish music show on BET at the time, but you became much more than just a guy who filled a niche role at the station. You actually handled a lot of production responsibilities and even did some other on-air stuff. What are some of the other memories that stand out to you about the old WBET?
Well, one of the times when I came to give up the Irish show, I was doing 5 hours on Sunday.
And you were looking to give up the show?
I was looking to give up the show because I was losing out at this time. This was in 82.
5 hours?
Yeah, maybe beginning of 83.
Wow.
And I was doing 5 hours, and I was losing out on singing jobs because I'd have to turn down singing jobs on Sunday night. And I called up the station manager, Sid Tufts, and I said, I'd like to come in to see you. Well, he knew why, and he said, you wanted to give up your show, didn't you? I said, yeah, I'm losing money on Sunday nights. And so he said, well, he said, we really don't want to lose the show. So he said, if you want, just come in and do 2 hours, and then we'll find somebody to come in for the other 3 and do something else. They had a format called Great Stars, Great Songs, and they played, Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra, and some of the 60s.
AM radio was still playing radio with
music absolutely. So then the program director, Bill Hess, said, okay, well, he said, we're going to find somebody to come in from 8 to 11. But he said, until we do, he says, after your Irish show, then at 8, then he says, just play whatever you want. He says, you want to play the Great Stars, Great Songs, or whatever. So I started bringing in some of my own oldies from home, and Mike Valenti, the engineer at the station, had a CB radio in the studio. So I was taking oldies requests on a CB radio at the station, which was kind of a unique thing. And it took 2 years went by, and Bill Hess still hadn't found anybody to come in at 8 o'clock. And the next thing you know, they got a show called the Sports Final, which went from 11 to 12. So naturally, I stayed from 11 to 12 to run that. And then somewhere in the late 80s, they had a gospel woman come in, and she started doing the gospel train. And so finally, I moved the show from 5 to 7, and she would come in at 7, and then I could leave. But it was great. A couple of years doing oldies, too. It mixed it up a little bit.
Who was the host of the Sports Final show on WBET back in the day, if you recall?
That was Mike Gilbert and Tom Frizzell. And we also had a baseball team, a softball team, WBET CAV, and Mike Gilbert was one of our best players.
Were you there when Betsy Zulis took a softball to the face?
Yes.
You were there for that story?
Yes, I was.
She told us that story on the air, your recollections of that fateful day.
I knew it happened, but I didn't actually see it.
Okay.
I knew about it right after the fact, and so I didn't actually see it.
How was the WBET softball team back in the day? I know Steve Mason was a part of it.
He was a part of it. He was good. We did pretty good. We lost one game 27-0 to
that's not too good.
A bunch of all-stars from a church group, but other than that, no, we did pretty good.
They had God on their side, I guess, right?
Of course.
We had a good time. I actually had... And I'll never forget this, and the people that were there that saw it, Steve Mason, he won't forget it, I don't think. I actually had an unassisted triple play at a park in Hyde Park one night, and it was the freakiest thing. There were 3 guys on base, and I was playing third, and the guy hit the ball over third base. Well, I leaped, and I'm tall, so I leaped it up, and I grabbed it, and I caught it. And I came right down on the bag, and that was 2 outs. The guy running from second was right there, and I tagged him. And I started walking off the field, and people were saying, there's only 2 outs. No, there's 3 outs. And nobody believed that actually happened. But I said, no, 1 out, 2 outs, 3 outs. And they said, oh, my God, they didn't believe that what actually happened. I didn't believe it either. I knew it happened, but it was like, it's something you'd never even dream of.
The stories we hear of this WBET softball team, pretty interesting. We should start a WXBR softball team in the summertime, Mike. This could make for some interesting stories in upcoming years.
Yeah.
We're chatting with Jim Larkin here on WXBR. Jim, it's funny, you were mentioning this to me off the air earlier, and it's something that a lot of people might forget about the old AM 1460 WBET. There was a point in time where WBET was an affiliate of both Boston Red Sox and Boston Bruins games, and you handled a lot of the production for Red Sox and Bruins games on the station.
Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes they would have games at the same time, and that would create some interesting scenarios for yourself.
Yeah, a couple of times it happened where the Red Sox game would be on, but then the Bruins game would start, and you'd have to run that. So I'd have to start taping the Bruins game on one reel-to-reel tape recorder while the Red Sox game was finishing, and then start another reel-to-reel tape to get the rest of the Bruins game, so that when the Red Sox game stopped, then you start the first Bruins tape and then the second one, so you get the whole game run on the station.
There was a point in time where Red Sox and Bruins games were broadcast on AM 1460. You forget about this stuff. It's nice hearing about the good old days from some folks like Jim
Larkin. I think
Larkin.
that was only 2 years, too. I don't think it lasted more than 2 years. I think after that they just had the Bruins.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the plaque indicating that we were an affiliate of both teams stayed on the wall for a lot longer than simply 2 years after that. You remember those on the wall.
Of course.
I know, yeah.
Well, you brought some interesting audio along with you this morning. Once again, we're chatting with Jim Larkin. Jim will be performing a little later on in the program along with our friends in the Brockton City Council, their band, the Council Chords. But you brought us some interesting audio this morning, which we are going to play some of. Tell us precisely what you brought us and what it is.
Well, when I first started the show in February of '82, one of the things I used to do was go out and tape local groups, and I would play them on the radio, and people loved it because it's not something you'd hear anywhere else, and it would give people an idea of what they're going to hear if they go out to the clubs and listen to the bands. But anyway, one year, the second year of the show, in '83, one of my band members, we had just finished a job, and I said, why don't you come to the station and we'll do a couple of live tunes. So we had just myself and Joe O'Donnell, who was a member of the band. He came up, and I thought, well, let's try something live and see how it sounds. And I'd never tried a live thing before, and squeezing into that little area with me and my banjo and Joe, who's a little heavier than I was at the time with his guitar. It wasn't easy, but we pulled it off. We did a few tunes, and so that's the audio I brought you. Goes back to 1983.
So you brought us audio from WBET 1983, the first ever live performance on your old program, Sounds of the Emerald Isle, here on AM 1460.
That's right. Yep.
So we'll play it. We'll play one song now, and we'll play two in the next segment. What's the first song on this disc you brought us, and tell us exactly what it is? Hey, you were the host of Sounds of the Emerald Isle for very long. I'll mention to the folks that we've got the Council Chords coming up a little later on in the program. But right now, Jim Larkin, back on AM 1460. For old time's sake, introduce a song for us.
Okay, well, this is a song written about me called The Big Strong Man. Now, it's about my brother Sylvester, and it's a popular Irish folk song from the 60s, 70s era. Big Strong Man. Have you heard about the big strong man? Well, he lives in a caravan. Have you heard about the Jeffrey Johnson fight? Oh, what a hell of a fight. Well, you can take all the heavyweights you got. What you got? Got a lad here who'll beat the whole lot. He used to ring the bells and the bell-free. Now he's gonna fight Jack Dempsey. That's me, brother Sylvester. What you got? Got a row of 40 medals on his chest. Big chest. Little 50 badmen in the west. He knows no risk. Big as a man. Hell's fire. Don't push. Just shout. Plenty of room for you and me. He's got an arm like a leg and a punch that will sink a battleship. Big ship takes all the army and the navy to put the wind up. Sylvester. Well, he thought he'd take a trip to Italy, and he thought that he'd go by sea. He jumped off the harbor in New York, and he swam like a man made of cork. Well, he saw the Lusitania in distress. What did he do? He put the Lusitania in his chest. Big chest. He drank all the water in the sea, and he walked all the way to Italy. That was me, brother Sylvester. What you got? Got a row of 40 medals on his chest. Big chest. Little 50 badmen in the west. He knows no rest. Big as a man, hell's fire. Don't push, just shove. Plenty of room for you and me. He's got an arm like a leg and a punch that'll sink a battleship. Big ship takes all the army and the navy to hunt the wind up Sylvester. Well, he thought I'd take a trip to old Japan, and they called out the whole brass band. He played every instrument they got, and like a lad there he beat the whole lot. Now the old church bells will ring, the old church choir will sing. They all came out to bid farewell to my big brother Sylvester. That was me, brother Sylvester. What you got? Got a row of 40 medals on his chest. Big chest. Little 50 badmen in the west. He knows no rest. Big as a man, hell's fire. Don't push, just shove. Plenty of room for you and me. He's got an arm like a leg and a punch that'll sink a battleship. Big ship takes all the army and the navy to wet the wind up Sylvester.
Live music from WBET 1983 here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. That was Jim Larkin. Jim, you still got those chops? You sounded good there.
I don't know. It's been a long time ago.
Well, we'll find out later on this morning when you perform with the Council Chords. Jim, we're going to step aside for a quick break. Mike Paver's going to fill us in with a local news update. You mind sticking around for another segment with us?
Not at all.
That's Jim Larkin joining us in studio here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. You are listening to the Metro South Morning Show. We'll step aside for a local news update courtesy of Mike Paver. Stick with us here on the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. AM 1460, the new WXBR. We're back at you here in the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. Peter Zimbor and Mike Paver here with you on this Monday morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you are listening. And once again, joining us in studio is the man with the knowledge about everything Irish and Irish music in the South Shore. He was the host of Sounds of the Emerald Isle here on AM 1460 for over 3 decades, and he was kind enough to join us this morning for our special St. Patrick's Day edition of PM in the AM, and he'll be performing with the Council Chords some Irish tunes a little later on the show. Mr. Jim Larkin. Jim, thanks for sticking around for another segment with us.
Hey, my pleasure, Peter.
So, Sounds of the Emerald Isle was on WBET/WXBR for 31 years. Were you with the old WXBR right up until the very end when the station went dark for about 7 months?
I was, yep.
You were? Was there ever any talk about you coming back here on the station afterwards, or no? What happened with that?
Well, after that happened, one of the guys that was brought in to look over WXBR happened to own the Taunton radio station, and he was a fan of the Irish show, and he asked me if I'd go to Taunton and do the show there.
So there was such a demand for Sounds of the Emerald Isle, WXBR ceases to exist for a period of time, and you were swooped up right away.
Yeah, that's basically, actually, I turned him down at first, and I was doing the show from the house for 3 weeks, but he had the station manager call me and say, well, let's just go have lunch anyway. You got nothing to lose, so I did, and there I am.
See, I've sensed you trying to get out of radio a few times, and it's never been able to happen. Earlier, you mentioned a story about you trying to quit doing Sounds of the Emerald Isle because it was taking away from your live performance gigs on Sunday. Ultimately, you're stuck with the radio. Station ceases to exist. You say, I don't want to do this anymore. Other stations make offers. They offer you lunch. All right, I'll take lunch. And then here you are again.
Well, you know, it's funny. You know, I'm retired from the insurance business now. I'm not singing anymore. And so, you know, I do have the time to do radio. It's one of the only things I can do these days. And if there's, the way I look at it, if there's only one person listening to you and they're getting enjoyment out of what you're doing, then it's worth it for me to do it. And so, you know, that's the way I look at it now. And whether it's a station there that wants me or whether it's doing it from the house or whatever, it's as long as people are enjoying it, I'm enjoying it.
You are somewhat of an AM 1460 historian. I don't know if you realize this, Mike, but a lot of the stuff we find online in relation to the history of WBET and ultimately WXBR, a lot of the audio that's been archived from all these years usually tends to originate from you. You've got just tons of stuff dating before even you were on WBET in the early 80s.
Matter of fact, I have even some, I have tons of reel-to-reel tapes that I've never gone through. I used to tape BET, CAV, they weren't CAV at the time before I was here, when they were BET FM. I used to tape different things from those stations, and I know I have some stuff. I know I have a couple of games that at the time didn't interest me, but once I come across them, they're going to be of interest to some people, players or families of people from that time, 70s, 80s. So eventually I'm going to put as much as I can on there so that everybody can reminisce and enjoy times past.
I love how he mentions the reel-to-reel, Mike. There was a point in time, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, you touched a reel-to-reel and used one once in your life,
Once,
right?
yes.
Once. I've never used a reel-to-reel in my life, and my reel-to-reel story is we're probably going close to a decade back now. Not quite, but close to a decade. And it was a Friday morning, and there was this production guy that would come in one day a week and do commercials. And I was voicing a commercial, and the initial copy I did, I recorded on the computer. But I always like to have a backup. And what I would use as the backup was a cart, which seems incredibly dated, circa 2014 now, or a cassette, which also seems incredibly dated, circa 2014. I realized the cart machine was not working in the production studio, nor was the cassette deck. And I casually asked this production guy, what should I use as a backup if the cart machine isn't working and the cassette isn't working? And he said, use the reel-to-reel. I said, I have no idea how to use a reel-to-reel. And that guy gave me such a look of disgust. What are they teaching you kids these days? I was like, whoa.
That reel-to-reel is sitting in the museum right here as we speak.
That's true. We actually have that reel-to-reel. It's probably a reel-to-reel you use. We have it up as a display as a part of Radio Past here at the station. There's no need for a reel-to-reel in any radio station circa 2014, unless you're pulling out some great old classics like the stuff you've got.
Well, you know, I have a quick reel-to-reel story myself. We used to do Wednesday night trivia. I used to come in with Steve Albert for an hour on Wednesday nights and Peter Rivora. And there was one night, well, a couple of weeks, there was one joker out there that would call in and use language they shouldn't use on the radio. And I don't know which one of
listeners.
I don't know which one of the guys said, geez, I wish we had some kind of a delay. And I said, well, I can hook up a delay. He said, how can you do that? I said, very easily. We have two reel-to-reels right here on the bench in the AM studio. We used to run reel-to-reel the shows. We had two of them. So I said, we tape into reel-to-reel 1. We run the tape, but don't use that take-up reel. Use the take-up reel of reel-to-reel 2 and use that playhead to play over the air. That way you have about 10-second delay between the time the tape hits the record head of one machine to the play head of the other. That way, if the moron calls in and tries to use that language, we cut it off before it goes out.
All we got to do is push a button.
We did that, yeah. But those in the days you didn't have that stuff, especially a station like BET. Stations that had that is like, the Boston ones.
Wow. So you were an innovator in the 10-second delay.
Well, we only did it once.
Oh.
In the following week, we never heard from the guy, and I guess once we were on to him, he probably
that
figured
guy's sole purpose to call in was to drop the F-bomb live on the radio, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think that was the bomb. Yeah, I think so.
He really got off on that, and then it happened. He was like, I'm not calling them anymore. We're chatting with Jim Larkin here on WXBR. Didn't you also record a lot of old jingles at the old station with your banjo and acoustic guitar? Didn't you do a lot of stuff like that, or am I mistaken? Or at least a few? Was there a Bat Bus jingle you did?
Yeah,
or
we
something?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, myself and Mark Burns sang a commercial for the Bat Bus Company. I don't know who wrote the song, and somebody said, what do you think? Can we do something? And Bill Siebert, I think, was the manager of the station then. I said, yeah. So I brought my guitar in, and Mark Burns was there. So I said, well, you sing it, I'll play. And so we did that, and that ran for a couple of years. Matter of fact, I had an awful time finding that commercial. After the Bat Bus stopped advertising, Charlie Bergeron had looked for it, everybody, Peter, because I wanted a copy of it, and I didn't have it. And I looked for years and years and years, and I just couldn't find it. But in searching reel-to-reel tapes of stuff from BET, sure enough, there it was on a Newsline show from 86 or 87.
Who was the host of Newsline at the time?
Bill Alex.
Bill Alex. And for those new listeners, Newsline is the program which was the predecessor to what is now the Ron Van Dam Show. As a matter of fact, when Ron Van Dam first started hosting on 1460, his program was called Newsline with Ron Van Dam, so ultimately it became what it is today. We're chatting with Jim Larkin here on AM 1460, the new WXBR, former host of Sounds of the Emerald Isle on AM 1460 for over 3 decades, and a AM 1460 historian. Another piece of WBET memorabilia of years past, which I believe that you dug up from the grave once again. This guy finds everything. Was when you take a look at significant morning show hosts of AM 1460 in the past, you think of Charlie Bergeron, of course. Steve Mason was very instrumental in teaching myself a lot about radio, and I'm sure Mike picked up on some things from him as well. But one name that goes way back to even before I think Mike and myself was alive was Doc Jones.
Oh, Doc Jones, yeah.
And you actually found some Doc Jones audio from way back when. If you didn't find it, you at least distributed it significantly online so that we've all heard it.
Right. I don't know. Somebody sent me that audio because for years people kept asking me would I put up a picture of Doc Jones. And I knew I had a couple of pictures somewhere. And I finally found one, and I put it up on the Internet, and somebody that had been dying to get this picture sent me some audio, and they posted it on one of the social networks, and I shared it. I didn't have, that wasn't my find, it was someone else's. I don't even remember who it was now. But I think since then, Jeff Falowitz, I think, has posted some Doc Jones. I don't know if you know Jeff. He used to be with the station back in the 80s, and I think somebody else posted a Doc Jones commercial or something on there.
I've been told that the photo of Doc Jones, which circulates online, there's really only one of them that circulates online, is not exactly an accurate description of what he looked like on a day-to-day basis, right, because of the fact that he was so done up for this photo,
yes,
and he looked kind of run down if you actually met him in real life. Did you ever get the chance to meet Doc Jones?
Once I did, yeah. He was doing a live remote broadcast, and it was before I moved to Brockton. I moved to Brockton in 78, and I believe that this was 75 maybe.
So he was just a staple for people listening to radio in this region for a long time.
Oh, he was. Even people that like me that didn't really follow Brockton radio before I moved to Brockton. Doc Jones was somebody you knew. He was somebody you would try to listen to at least occasionally. He was on the list of people that have to be listened to.
And what was it about Doc Jones that made him listen to? Because, I mean, you know, he did all the staples, like, at the time, school lunches and things like that, things which really aren't necessary to do circa 2014 because kids have, like, 10 options when they go to school for lunch. But what was it about Doc Jones that made him must listen to radio if you were in the listening region where you could pick up the signal?
Just his presentation of everything was awesome. He was one of a kind. Like Salty Brine, for instance, you know, one of a kind. You another one you have to listen to every so often, and you know, he was great.
Certainly a AM 1460 legend. We're chatting with Jim Larkin here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. Before our last news update, we played a song that was a recording from 1983 that you brought along for us from Sounds of the Emerald Isle, your former program here on AM 1460. You brought two other songs from that same show with us. Tell us what this next song is as well. Take a listen to it here on WXBR this morning.
Okay, this next song is a good Irish drinking song called The Mountain Dew, made famous by the Clancy brothers. And Joe O'Donnell is on the guitar. I'm on the banjo, but I started the song on the penny whistle and then switched to the banjo after the introduction. But it's always a crowd pleaser in the clubs that I used to sing at called the Mountain Dew.
Live Irish music from 1983 in the WBET studios we bring you this morning here on WXBR.
Let grasses grow and waters flow in a free and Irish way, and give me enough of the fine old stuff that's made in Galway Bay. And policemen all from Donegal, Sligo and Lee from Two, we'll give them a sip and we take a sip of the real old Mountain Dew. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. At the foot of the hills is a day to the still, and the smoke curls up in the sky. By the smoke and the smell you can play because that is 14 for an airplane. It fills the air with odors rare and betwixt about me and you. When home and alone with a big or bowl or the cup of the Mountain Dew. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Now learned men who use the pen never wrote such phrases high. That sweet machine from Ireland Green distilled from weed and rye. Go away your pills and a cure all ills, a pig and a Christian a Jew. Take off your coat and grease your throat to the real old Mountain Dew. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Let grasses grow and waters flow in a free and Irish way, and give me enough of the fine old stuff that's made in Galway Bay. And policemen all from Donegal, Sligo and Lee from Two, we'll give them a sip and we take a sip of the real old Mountain Dew. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day. Hi, diddly-lum, diddly-doo-lum, diddly-doo-day-diddly-day.
That was from Sounds of the Emerald Isle on WBET in 1983, but of course it's now 2014. You're listening to WXBR. That comes to us from our guest on the program this morning, Jim Larkin. You had live performances for all 3 decades of that show's existence here on AM 1460. What are some of your favorite live performances in studio? And outside of in studio, you actually went out and recorded bands at bars and whatnot, correct?
I did, yeah. I think the one of my favorite nights was the day Mike came in and we had the Council Chords in the studio, and it was a 30th anniversary radio show, and an old band member that hadn't played with me since 1980, he was going to come in, so I brought my banjo, and I hadn't been playing in many years. I brought my banjo, my 12-string, and he didn't show up. So the Council Chords, I had invited them on to do a couple of tunes, and when they were singing, I brought the banjo out and was playing in the background. And it was after that show, Tom Monahan says, "Oh, you got to join up with us and play at these places that we play for." That's how that started.
So despite never being a member of the Brockton City Council, you have become an honorary member of the Council Chords, to which they really can't perform without you, and you'll be performing with them a little later on here on our show.
Well, we were practicing at City Hall the other night, and I decided I'm not going to run for politics. Too old to run for politics, but I am going to run for citizen at large.
Citizen at large, Jim Larkin.
That'll be my claim to politics.
Citizen at Large Jim Larkin joining us in studio. Jim, it's been great having you in studio today because not only do we get to catch up on some old times, not only will we be bringing the Council Chords along with you a little later on to sing some traditional Irish songs, but this carries on another tradition as we try to bridge the past with the present as we look towards the future here on WXBR. Each and every year on St. Patrick's Day, you always would join the Newsline program.
That's right. We do Irish trivia, play Irish comedy, Irish music, sometimes some live stuff, and we had a great time. It was something that went on for 30 years.
Did that continue on with Ron Van Dam's involvement in Newsline?
Not every year. One year we didn't do it, but it did for the most part, yeah.
Any good experiences with Ron Van Dam that you can share of doing the St. Patrick's Day show on the old WBET or even WXBR in the latter years?
Oh, it was always, Ron is great, so it was always good to work with Ron. Always had some, you never knew what he was going to say, you know. He was always ready with a line or two that you didn't expect. So he was good. It was good to be on with Ron.
Ron Van Dam still on for those of you.
But a couple of times Ron stepped out and he said, well, I'll let you do the show yourself. And, you know, so I don't know. I think maybe just one year Ron was on with me, and I think the other times he just let me come in and do it.
Well, Ron Van Dam will be on later on this morning on this St. Patrick's Day between 9 and 11 here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. There's one last piece of audio that you brought for us this morning, dating back to 1983 on the old WBET from Sounds of the Emerald Isle. Why don't you tell us what this is?
Okay, this is an Irish folk tune called Quittin in the Kitchen, and this features my old singing buddy Joe O'Donnell on the verses of the song, myself on the banjo, Joe on the guitar, and it's a lively tune.
Jim Larkin, Sounds of the Emerald Isle, live music from 1983 here on WXBR.
Come, single bell and bow, and you may pay attention. Don't ever fall in love, it's the devil's own invention. Oh, I say fell in love with a maiden so bewitching, Miss Henrietta Bell out of Captain Kelly's kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee. At the age of 17, I was apprentice to a grocer, not far from Stephen's Street, where Miss Henry used to go, sir. Her manners were sublime, she set me hard to twitching, and she invited me to a holly in the kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee. Well, next Sunday being the day we were to have the flare-up, I dressed myself rightly, and I pressed that I'll be head up. The captain had no wife, and he had gone a fishing, and we struck a pie light down middle stairs in the kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee. With her arms around my waist, she slightly hinted flattish to the door in dreadful haste. In Captain Kelly's carriage, her eyes were filled with hate, and poison she was bitten. When the captain met the door, walked right into the kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee. When the captain came downstairs, should he saw the situation, in spite of all my prayers, I was marched up to the station. For me, they'd take no bail, and again home I was itching, and I had to tell the tale how I came into the kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee. Well, I said she did invite me, but she gave a flat denial, but a song she did invite me, and I was held for trial. She swore I robbed the house in spite of all the screeching, and I got 6 months hard for me curtain in the kitchen. With me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee, with me to la and me to la-dee, and me to la and me to la-dee. Joseph, thank you for joining the Sounds of the Emerald.
That's live music from Sounds of the Emerald Isle here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. That live music back at the old 60 Main Street WBET studios in 1983. We're joined in studio by the man who was the host of that program, Jim Larkin. You know, you've been complimenting the studios here at 250 Belmont Street a lot, the new WXBR studios, and I think you can probably understand from having lived lived through it. When people ask myself and Mike Pava if we missed the 60 Main Street studios, our answer always comes quick. No.
Well, down there, it was just, in all my years there, every time you get there on a Sunday, or no matter if I was there to do another show on a different day, every time you push a button or lift a volume control, you'd cringe and wonder, I hope this is going to work. Because wires were here, there, people would plug this in, bypass this. I mean, you never knew what to expect. And, it seems like, here everything
that place
looks
was
like
held together by clarinet reeds and bubblegum towards the end.
Oh, I know, yeah.
That board, how old was that board that you did the morning show on, that Steve Mason and Charlie Bergeron? I think Doc Jones used that board. How old was that board that was there until the very end?
I have no clue. They were going to get rid of it the year I started. They said, don't get too used to it because by the end of the year, we're going to have a new board.
30 years later, same board was still there.
Same board.
Wow.
More tape on it, more things cut out of it, but same board.
What happened to that board, Mike?
I have no idea. I have no clue.
That would be a unique part of AM 1460 history. It would be a nice part of the
Somebody
AM 1460.
was selling one of those on eBay, the exact same thing, a year ago for $500. And I posted a thing to former BET members saying, does this look familiar? You want your chance at one that works? Here it is.
It wasn't the board from WBET.
No, it wasn't.
Just the model.
It was the same one, exact same make, model, and this was in working condition.
Wow.
And to look at it, it looked like it just came off the production line.
Wow.
In the 60s, maybe? I don't know. I don't know when those were.
That thing was
Ancient.
That was a battle-tested board, if I don't say so myself, Mike.
Battle-tested.
Many memories
Battle-tested.
came through that board, though, I'll tell you.
Many memories came through that board. Well, Jim, you're going to stick around with us performing with the Council Chords a little later on, actually,
Yep.
after our next news update. Final song that you brought to us this morning from Sounds of the Emerald Isle, 1983. What is this? Or did we perform?
I think
We
did
played
all
that.
three.
We played all
We
three.
played that,
Oh,
yeah.
what am I doing? You're the radio pro. You should have reminded me that we'd already played all three.
Did I tell you we already played that, Peter?
Now you've mentioned it. I thought there was four. There was only three. Jim, I want to thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you,
us
Peter.
here on AM 1460 this morning. We'll be joined in studio by the Council Chords up next. You'll be performing alongside them. One of three performances for them today. They're playing here at the WXBR studios later on this morning at 11 a.m. They'll be playing at City Hall Plaza in Brockton for an Irish Heritage / St. Patrick's Day celebration. Then a little later on, you guys are playing at the Council on Aging.
That's right. Yep.
You guys are the Dropkick Murphys of the Brockton region, I guess.
No, with the drop kicks. And
Three performances in one day. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Mike.
We'll bring the Council Chords in after this local news update courtesy of Mike Pava. Stick with us here on WXBR.